Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Monday. We're back. Monday, June 26, 2017. Presidential Apprentice still on the air. Believe it or not, I haven't pulled that from circulation. Week 23, as it happens. Special way to kick off this week, of course, was to have none of my edits from last night's attempt at getting the Morning Post put together. So probably a little bit of a connectivity issue on my part. I was in mid-transit still. Anyway, trying to get the computers up and running, and a couple seconds behind the old schedule. Everything's a little whacked out this morning, but we'll try and pull it through. I decided to take the weekend and go and do some visiting out at a beautiful locale and absorb too much of the sun's ultraviolet light. I just wanted to keep it from harming the rest of you. So I absorbed it for you. And I think that will probably affect the show. It's very hot in here. At least it feels that way. If you stand in close proximity to me, I'm sunburned. Did I use enough sunblock? I think, well, obviously not really enough. But, yeah, I sprayed myself pretty good. But, yeah, those aerosol ones, they just don't seem to work. You got to put all the heavy lotion on. In my day, we had copper tone and liked it. Anyway, didn't work all that well. And, well, we'll try and pull through and drink a lot of water, and I think that's probably the best we can do. We'll bring a doctor in here, Dr. Greg Dworkin, who can tell me, probably you could just avoid the whole sunburn thing. We don't have to talk about it. Let's see, what else happened over the weekend? I don't know. I was distracted by pretty much nothing happening around. Man, it was very nice. Trying to catch up this morning. I see Donald Trump is panic tweeting about the Russia probe again, with just to come to tell us that none of it is his fault. And he wasn't really the one who did it, and it was all Obama's fault, and something crooked Hillary, which is why he panic tweets about it every morning. Doesn't look like he's going to get it over it anytime soon. He was out golfing this weekend as well, up here in my area, stuck to the Virginia course this time around after having... Well, did he play at both New Jersey and Virginia? Didn't we hear that he had driven over the green at his Bedminster, New Jersey course on like Thursday, but by Saturday, Sunday, he was back in Virginia playing again. I don't know. I'm a little bit confused as to how and where he takes his golfing vacations. To get two different courses in two different states over the weekend is a real accomplishment. So at least he has that to point to. It is the week in which we are looking to the Senate to take up, well, we wish they wouldn't, but we're expecting that they'll be taking up the tax cut bill, masquerading, of course, as a health care bill. People spent the weekend parsing through the draft text. We're still not 100% certain that is the text that they intend to stand at the end of this process. And there's still every possibility that Mitch McConnell may use the various parliamentary tricks at his disposal to pull something completely different out of the hat at the last minute, or just something slightly different but worse. I believe I've seen some analysis over the weekend that how should I put it? That supposed at first that some important provision of the bill had been mistakenly left out in their rush to craft this thing in secret and bring it out in time for this week's last legislative crack at it before the July 4th recess, or the planned July 4th recess anyway. But then some speculation that it was left out entirely on purpose so that that could be the cosmetic change brought forward in the form of an amendment at the last minute that convinced the crocodile tears set among the Senate Republican Conference that now the bill as written they had to oppose, but now this fantastic change has been made and they've been brought on board. So we'll trace that and try and set this whole thing up for you. I think everybody's probably more informed about it than your hosts this morning. But let's turn to Greg. He's very likely to be up to date on these things. Good morning, Greg.
Sammy, hey, good morning.
Hi. It's okay.
You know what I think's going to happen? I don't think there's going to be a vote this week.
You don't think so? It really is up in the air. I mean, it's kind of crazy.
I don't think he has the votes, and I don't think he'll vote this week. Now, I have a 50-50 sense about whether it ultimately gets passed with the sweeteners and so on and so forth. But here's the logic. You have people who are committing themselves in public in kind of a big way. Dean Heller committing himself is pretty big, and it's pretty clear that his governor, Brian Sandoval, who he keeps saying he's going to defer to, Sandoval does not want this passed.
Okay.
And it's not good for Nevada. You have Ron Johnson, one of the crocodile tear conservatives, putting an op-ed today in the New York Times where the Senate health care bill fails. And it's not like he can't change his mind. He's one of the people who I don't trust one bit, but he really commits himself in public to saying this is such a bad bill, I can't vote for it in its current form. Rand Paul says the same thing.
Yeah.
Susan Collins is on Meet the Press on Sunday and says it cuts too much from Medicaid. I can't do this. And when Ari Fleischer and others, Kellyanne Conway, get on TV and say it doesn't really cut Medicaid, Collins says, well, that's not true. It does, and I can't do
it. Well, she's right about that. Well,
she is, but I mean, what I'm saying is that it isn't just like muttering. It's like committing themselves in public. That becomes very difficult to then pull back from a publicly stated position and say, 2 days ago, when I said I can't do it, now the CBO bill comes out confirming everything I said and maybe even worse. And that might even be out today. And then turn around and say, okay, now that the CBO says it's worse than I said it was for the reasons that I said it was, now I'm voting for it. It's very difficult to do that. So everything that I'm hearing is that, if anything, the pressure is ratcheting up. One of the tweets that I have up on the Pundit Roundup today, just to give you an example, is something that Daniel Dale, Daniel Dale, he's the Toronto reporter that tracks how many lies Trump said on any given day.
Yes. And
he's got on my Pundit Roundup today, he's got this, and this was from yesterday, he's got a piece here that says, today's headlines on Trump health bill in 4 states he won: Arkansas, Arizona, Kansas, and Wisconsin. And let me just read you some of those. Thousands in state face insurance loss under Senate's bill. U.S. Medicaid trims would trigger cuts in Arkansas Works program. Medicaid cuts likely to hurt drug, mental care. Kansas experts pan GOP health bill. For those who depend on Medicaid, proposed federal caps instill fear. These are local papers. And in fact, there's even a New York Times story about it today, just talking about how bad the press has been. And so the Republican senators all see this. It's very difficult to avoid all of this. And I think that they're going to have a very, very difficult time getting to yes.
Well, I hope so. It used to mean something. People very rarely did take hard public positions in opposition to something, find no changes made to it, and then change their mind and vote yes. But then again, I guess now they can say, the president's doing it, I can do it too.
Right. So I have this Storify from Seth Maskett, who is a political scientist. It's in the Pundit Roundup. Seth Maskett with some political calculus on repeal and replace. He's a political scientist at the University of Denver. I like him.
I like science.
I like science. I like political science. The GOP's actions on healthcare seem politically suicidal. Luckily, this is only 8 tweets long. So why are they pushing ahead with this? We can't evaluate the cost of a political act without understanding the cost of not doing that act. The GOP has made a promise to repeal ACA in its central message for 4 consecutive election cycles. Not pushing for a health overhaul would be seen as a betrayal of GOP activists and would result in many primary challenges. Primary voters have longer memories and are way scarier than general election voters. And the GOP is also gambling that given polarization, retrospective voting is dead. Either that or GOP voters will stay loyal despite losing insurance if they think it makes Dems sad.
Yeah.
Now, political science literature suggests this is wrong, but GOP's been specializing in disproving that lately, is his point. So it's not completely without logic for them to, do something that doesn't make any sense to anybody, because the sense there is that, well, maybe, they made these promises. And one of the more interesting pieces isn't Ron Johnson's in the New York Times. It's Hugh Hewitt's in the Washington Post, which is kind of an amazing piece. It's defense, of course, of this bill. Replacing Obamacare is a make-or-break moment for Republicans, he says. Basically, what he says is, if they don't pass this, then they can kiss their congressional majority goodbye. Okay. To fail this week, he says, almost certainly forfeits the House majority in next year's midterm elections, but perhaps also the Senate's, and with the latter, the ability to confirm Supreme Court justices and lower court judges, pass budgets under reconciliation, have any chance at serious tax reform, and approve the crucial repeal of the Defense Department sequestration. This is an imperative, he says. And basically, he makes the case, which is really odd, that in no way, shape, or form at all does he defend this bill. Mm. He just says you have to pass it because Republicans.
Hey, that's going to work with them.
It might. I mean, but it's just funny because this is, one of the stronger why you have to do it. It's got nothing to do with the bill.
Right. Well, the bill has
nobody
nothing to do
defends
with
the bill.
healthcare. How could you? I mean, it's very difficult to defend from the start, like on so many levels. One, if you think you're going to do something about healthcare, well, then you better get started because there's nothing in this bill about it. And then two, only way we can defend it is if we don't pass this bill that we're not 100% sure exactly what it does for anybody except hurt them, then we won't be able to say we passed a bill. And if that happens, well, then we won't be able to pass any more bills.
Right, something like that, which is really weird. I don't think that it's correct, really, to say that people are trying to, repeal the Affordable Care Act with this bill. Of course, it doesn't do that. But I'm not even sure that it's fair to say this is a tax cut bill. What it really is a bill to change and, to a large extent, get rid of Medicaid, which has been a Republican goal for a long, long time. I think it needs to be seen as such. And people need to understand and realize that the majority of people, for example, in nursing homes are paid by Medicaid. Yeah. That people who work in hospitals are paid by Medicaid, and that money for lunch and for things that you buy in the stores supports small businesses in your area. I mean, the ripple effect, the USA Today has a nice story on that. The ripple effect of taking away Medicaid dollars is enormous. And it matters for local communities. It matters for local hospitals, especially in rural areas that might go bankrupt. And what the Republicans are trying to do is end Medicaid as we know it. We need to be very clear about that. And there is a constituency for this. It's basically anybody who has parents, anybody who has children, anybody who plans on being old someday.
Well, there's not a lot of that.
Yeah.
At least, and it's probably a much better framing. It truly is. It's full of tax cuts, but it would be a mistake to call it, I guess, simply a tax cut bill. You're not going to get those tax cuts. Don't make any mistakes about that.
Right. That's only for CEOs that make more than $500,000. Forget it. It's got nothing to do with you. What matters to you is that your grandmother's going to be kicked out of nursing home, or you're going to have to mortgage your house to pay for it, leaving nothing for you.
Oh well. What did you want anyway?
Exactly. So, who did you vote for? Let me just, ask you that question because, it matters.
Well, this may cost them the midterm elections. That would be fine with me if that.
It would be fine with me. The CBO score is going to be out, as I said, sometime this week, maybe as soon as today. I think that matters. Here's a nice Yahoo story. CBO likely to say millions lose coverage under Senate healthcare bill.
Why would they do that?
And I think that we should not get into the weeds about how many millions, 14, 16, 12, 15, 18, 21, millions.
Yeah, 1 million. That would be bad.
Millions are going to get kicked off. And interestingly, my senator, Chris Murphy, who's apparently the ranking Democrat on the Appropriations Committee, sent a letter to the CBO saying, you generally score these things in 10-year blocks. In this particular case, could you please look at years 11, 12, and 13, because that's where a lot of the Medicaid cuts show up. And so they're trying to hide it. Please don't hide it. Mm. And you got a letter back from them saying, yes, we will look at that.
Okay. I know that there were Senate Republicans that were scheming after this thing is done. to try and change the rules essentially so that the CBO was scoring out further. They'd have to, and using a 20, perhaps 25-year budget window, but not yet. Please don't do that just now. Let's start after this bill.
Right. Interestingly, Bill Cassidy is still undecided on the health care reform bill. And I say interesting specifically because I think that there's and Brian Beutler has a very nice piece on this. Democrats' last best chance to rescue Obamacare isn't the strident opposition, but back-channel negotiations with persuadable Republican senators. What's he talking about? He's talking about Cassidy Collins.
Perfectly legal back channel.
Yeah. He's suggesting that off camera, so that they're not embarrassed, because you don't like to shame people, that they talk about, you let this slide and we'll take another look at Cassidy Collins and maybe support that. I have a Vox piece back in January that Sarah Cliff wrote, Cassidy Collins, the GOP replacement plan that lets liberal states keep Obamacare explained. And it has a little bit more detail about exactly what's in it, which is also known as the Patient Freedom Act. And it's a very, very different plan than that offered by the House and Senate. So maybe you get Cassidy and Collins to back Cassidy Collins in exchange for not backing I can't believe they're doing this bill that they have there. And that might be a way to move forward in the future.
Or, I guess it's a little late for bringing that one in as a last-minute substitute, but you never know.
Well, not now. I mean, this is something that has to sit there and you do it later.
Okay. Well, so...
And remember, these are back channels. For now, you just vote no. Later, we bring this up.
All right.
At the bottom of my long list here, I have this piece from the Times. Senate health bill gets a wary reception from coast to coast, which is more than just the four that I mentioned. Again, which I think are important. And I think, the whole thing is that going forward, what winds up happening is that the more you're out there in the community, the more phone calls and such you're going to get to the individual Senate offices. Now, I don't know what individual Senate offices are running. Chris Murphy, my senator, already announced that he's gotten 375 calls on this. And so far, it's 375 to 0 against.
But check out that number, by the way. I mean, if you thought that he was getting 375,000 phone calls, he's not.
No, I mean, so every call matters, and 500 calls matter. And you have time to make those calls today because the vote's this week, but probably Thursday if he wants it, Mitch McConnell. And again, I can't know. It's impossible to nail this down. It's jello. But my guess is that it won't get voted on.
Well, I wouldn't mind seeing that happen, especially if it meant that they ruined their vacation and also didn't vote on it afterwards.
Yeah, it could happen. Anyway, okay, nice piece here from E.J. Dionne. And I want to cover this because part of the theme of my pundit roundup today was that there's no way to sell this bill. Therefore, what they're doing is lying about it. So this is a piece by E.J. Dionne, the Senate's 3 big lies about health care. Lie 1, Democrats and progressives are unwilling to work with Republicans and conservatives on this issue. I just explained to you why that's not true. We can take another look at Cassidy Collins and tweak it and make it acceptable. And we also would very much like to fix some of the issues with the individual markets. We know how. Austin Fracht had a wonderful piece that I put up, I think, on Saturday in the pundit roundup from several months ago about here are the things you need to do to fix Obamacare. You have to fix the risk corridor issues. You have to, fully fund the money that's been propping up the insurance companies for uncertainty. That was all part of the bill. You just have to basically institute what the bill was when it was originally done, and that will help fix it. What Democrats aren't going to get behind is getting rid of Medicaid. So when they say Democrats and progressives are unwilling to work with Republicans and conservatives on this issue, question is, what is this issue? This bill doesn't repeal Obamacare. This bill gets rid of Medicaid. Oh, well, they're lying about it, you see, because they say, no, that's not really true. Ari Fleischer says there are no Medicaid cuts in GOP reforms. For decades, the press has done a rotten job of dealing with budget stories. Here are the numbers, and he goes through why that's not true. And Republican conservative Craig Garthwaite, who is a healthcare economist and healthcare policy expert, writes back on Twitter, all this is on the Pundit Roundup, and says, listen, Ari Fleischer, there are two choices. You're either obtuse or you're lying. It's up to you, but you can't honestly have this position. And it's not just Fleischer. Secretary Price gets on CNN and says the Medicaid cuts in the GOP health bill is not a cut. Emma Sando, who's a health policy wonk, says this is 100% wrong and a blatant lie, and not the only lie.
Rats.
And then Senator Toomey says the GOP bill will make permanent the Medicaid expansion and nobody loses coverage. And Chris Murphy says, this is ridiculous. This is like saying everybody can have a car, but we're not going to pay for it. Yeah, you can stay on Medicaid. There's just no money.
Yeah. For any of it. I mean, it's not that the price of it goes up for you.
But you can stay on it. Yeah. Nobody said you can't stay on it. We'll cover pre-existing conditions. We won't remove the part that say they have to be covered, but you're only going to get $1.
Yeah.
That's your problem. You have to take some personal responsibility, as Mike Pence said.
Oh, yes.
Right? So you have all of these lies going on anyway. So lie number one is that the Democrats aren't willing to work with Republicans. What we're not willing to work with Republicans on is sabotaging health care for America. Number two, this bill is primarily about improving health care for American families, as we just went over. That's nonsense. And lie number three, the Senate bill is a compromise. Between whom? Between Senator Lee and Senator Paul? Who's this a compromise with? It's a compromise between Mitch McConnell and his staff who wrote it, because nobody else had input into it.
Yeah. A compromise between two people who don't know what they compromised on. We weren't there, but...
Right, exactly. So that's basically the summary of what's going on. The more you know, the more aggravated you get. But The good news is that it's actually many of the stories this morning in the major papers are along the lines of opposition to healthcare is building, and I think that's right.
Well, that is good.
Healthcare reform, that is to say, which is what the labeling is, because it isn't really healthcare reform.
Well, we're not opposed to healthcare, per se.
No, we like healthcare.
Okay, well, at least there's that. Armando had sent me a note that said that you needed to discuss your draft Mitch Landrieu for president idea.
Well,
did you have one?
Armando brought up the fact that Mitch Landrieu was actually doing some wonderfully astute political work lately.
Well, he
was probably referring to an appearance on cable, but the fact is that when Mitch Landrieu gave his speech and took the actions to take down Confederate monuments,
right,
it was a wonderful thing.
Oh, okay.
And the fact is that Mitch Landrieu is a very experienced politician with very good political skills. And when you look around the landscape as to who's going to be available in 2020, there isn't anybody better.
Well, okay.
Would he wind up on the ticket? Could he balance, somebody of color or a woman on the ticket? Absolutely. In the major slot, in the vice presidential slot, remains to be seen. But he's pretty darn good, and I just want to throw that name out there and make sure that people are aware of it.
Well, it's early enough. You're allowed to throw it out there and not be blamed for anything. It's hard to get. It's a difficult habit to break.
And just remember, if he does well, it was my idea, and if he doesn't do well, it was Armando's idea.
Right, and then okay. So,
let's go on the record and say that right now too.
Oh, all right. Well, that's how we started. We might as well blame it on him.
Yeah, sure, because he's the one that brought it up. Right. He actually did, because he was commenting on how well he was doing. Here's another piece to change the subject only slightly. Back in the Pundit Roundup, I have a little piece from Simon Rosenberg. 4 tweets. I have the picture here, and I think I actually put it in our roundup here that I sent to you. Can we assess Trump presidency so far? What's working exactly? The economy's slowing, deficit is rising, U.S. healthcare is now in disarray, relations with allies are frayed, bad mojo with Canada and Mexico, North Korea more threatening, Middle East more dangerous, global order weakened, a deeply unpopular president, weakening U.S. democratic norms, refusal to take Russian threat seriously, leaving U.S. homeland exposed, open to the case that Trump has left something better than he found it, but at this point, hard to see. The world's more dangerous and the U.S. is not better off. Frank Rich has a piece in New York Magazine. Just wait, Watergate didn't become Watergate overnight either. It just reminds us that the time frame is such that having a Republican Congress, if things are as bad as they might be, isn't going to save Trump. Yeah, people can say, oh, it's all political. You don't get impeached unless it's political. If the information that comes out is bad enough, then he's toast regardless. It's just that. It takes a long time. Watergate took a long time. It took a year. It took longer. And it just doesn't happen over a couple of months, no matter how bad Trump is. The interesting thing is that it started like on day 2 of the Trump administration. But, this is inevitable. This is inexorable. It's a juggernaut. You can't stop it.
That's a lot of ways to say it.
Yep. All true.
Okay. Well, I'm ready for it to happen. It's going to be summer, and we need some entertainment around here.
So basically, that's the roundup for this morning. I know a lot happened, but it actually wasn't as eventful a weekend as some of the others have been. Oh, true. And just to throw in for the fun of it, I do have a picture of some of Trump's tweets from this morning you were talking about. Let me just read them to you. There's only 4 of them.
Oh.
The Democrats have become nothing but obstructionists. They have no policies or idea. All they do is delay and complain. They own Obamacare. Okay. That's actually good because Kaiser says it's popular. A lot more popular than Trump is.
I would like to keep it. I own it and stop trying to steal it from me.
Right. The reason that President Obama did nothing about Russia after being notified by the CIA of meddling is that he expected Clinton would win. Now that to me is pretty acknowledgement of the fact that Russia meddled, which, remember, Trump is denying.
Yes.
And did not want to rock the boat. He didn't choke. He colluded or obstructed, and it did the Dems and crooked Hillary no good. Remember also, whatever Donald Trump accuses other people of doing, he's doing.
Right.
So that makes me think more than ever there's collusion. The real story is that President Obama did nothing after being informed in August about Russian meddling, with 4 months looking at Russia. Those were his tweets. And it seems to me, I'm no lawyer, but it seems to me pretty blatant acknowledgement of the fact that Russia, in fact, did meddle.
Yeah, so they did, well, I mean...
Russia didn't meddle, and if they did, it had nothing to do with my winning. And if it did, it had nothing to do with the fact that I'm popular now. And if I'm not, that's besides the point, and besides, you're a libtard.
Yes, on top of which there was plenty of groundwork being done that along the lines of nobody meddled, but if they did, it's okay. Because it's not illegal.
That's Brit Hume on Fox News this weekend.
Right.
Pretty remarkable stuff.
Yep.
I mean, I know they get paid to say crap, but boy.
Well, luckily we don't have to depend on whether or not it's illegal. If the question is, well, shall we impeach the president over it? It's not that question now with this particular Congress, of course. But I suppose if you switch things and you have people willing to look more critically at it, you can put that aside. It doesn't need to be illegal. It never did.
Right.
But it is.
So Arliss Bunny brings up an interesting point, and that is to say, when you talk about the mess and the disaster and the debacle, do you talk about millions or do you talk about individual stories? And the answer is both. It depends upon the context.
Yes.
With the CBO score coming out, that's the story, so you definitely have to highlight that. The reason is that you use the CBO numbers to refute what Republicans are saying. You use the individual stories to sway public opinion. Those are 2 slightly separate things.
Yes.
Or you can, there was this great thing that's floating around, and I had it, I believe, on the Saturday Pundit Roundup, where Shelley Moore Capito from West Virginia is confronted by a mom who's showing her pictures of her daughter, and then just talks about what it means for her daughter in chemo to be thrown off of care and so on and so forth. And it starts nicely enough. Here are these pretty pictures of my daughter. You want to see them? Yeah, sure. Oh, yeah, they're really nice. And then goes into the whole thing. That's how you personalize it. And you can't get away. You're stuck. You have to listen to that if you're Shelley Moore Capito. And those kinds of stories are exactly what's needed. Or you could do it with disabled children, however it is you wish to do it. But there's nothing wrong with having a story like that and say, and by the way, the CBO says millions more, not just this one.
Yep. Well, that's the way to couple them together. It's a good one, too, that's for sure.
But we do need that number, and that number is coming out.
Yes, well, we'll get it, and then they'll say it's fake news. But okay.
So that's what I want to talk about. What do you want to talk about?
I don't know. The president's still tweeting. Trump is still going on his rage tweets. I can talk about that. Nothing new has come out, but he's still screaming about you can't prove anything. And he's brought up tapes again, I noticed. That's pretty remarkable. He seems to really want to stick to that point, even though hasn't got any. or say he claims he doesn't now. And I guess people are still busy speculating over whether or not his saying that he didn't tape anything and putting it that way means somebody else did. I don't think any. Well, I don't know. It'd be hard for me to believe that there weren't recordings being made in that nuts house, whether it's the White House or any other. But I guess we could speculate on that a little bit more too. But wow, he's really going to hang himself. Honest to God, we're all going to watch.
Right. So, you want a gun story?
Yes. No. Yeah.
Sort of. You know, this, the Newtown families, the Sandy Hook families.
Yes.
Are suing Remington.
Right. Yeah.
And they're claiming, negligence on the part of the gun manufacturer, because the AR Bushmaster, was used in the Sandy Hook, slayings. Mm-hmm. And of course, there's a federal law that protects the gun manufacturers, but they're in court anyway. And what's interesting is that whereas most people feel like this suit ultimately is going to be denied, it's not going to go the way the families want, mm-hmm. the very presence of the suit has disturbed the gun manufacturers enough so that the NRA and the local group here, the sports sports shooting folks, have really jumped in a big way to defend Remington, claiming that if Remington loses, it will severely restrict the ability of gun manufacturers to make guns like the AR-15, which of course are just for hunting and target shooting. Yes, and home defense in case you're attacked by the Soviet army. Well, because after all, in most mass shootings, this is not the gun that's used, and so on and so forth, and that's their argument. But what's interesting is that the suit is still bubbling, and there was a story in the local paper over the weekend that the gun manufacturers associations are really starting to put some money and time and muscle into trying to make sure it doesn't go any further, which is something you don't do with a doomed suit. True. That's true. You wait until it takes the money from you, if you really don't believe it. So I think this is basically an appeal in terms of where that's going. I have a story from May, but there's actually a more recent one. I'll give you a copy of the May story while I dig up the June one for you. All right. I just thought that should be on your radar, just so you know. Good one. We should be able to keep track of a couple of different moving parts on these things. Would think. But basically, that's it for today. That's my roundup for this Monday morning. I hope you have a lovely Monday morning. It's really very nice weather these days. Yeah, it's a couple more days. And I'll be back on Wednesday, and we'll talk about it some more. And by then, hopefully, we'll have a CBO score, and we'll see what's going on, and we'll get a better sense of whether this thing's going to pass or not. Okay, yeah. I mean, our old cliche. We'll have to wait and see. We will, but remember the old Graduate movie. Right? I've heard of that. Dustin Hoffman graduates, and some guy walks over to him and says, "I just have one word for you: plastics." Right. Well, I just have one word for you. I'm going to whisper in your ear as I leave: Cassidy Collins. That's two. Because it makes just as much sense. Why not? Well, I'll have to look into that eventual. Well, we'll see whether it comes to pass. But I have to see if I can parse through that off the air sometime. And I have that box planer on Cassidy Collins in our list here. I've got that there. Thank you. Well, just in case you need it. But we'll talk to you later. I got to go, and you got to stay, and we'll see what goes on. Would that it were different. Like the but too bad. You got to stay, and I get to go. Okay. We'll do that, all right, and we'll see you on Wednesday. You get to leave for 2 days. Yeah, exactly. Take care. Okay, you do the same. Thanks, Greg, bringing us up to date on these things. Let me see. I gotta take a look at this. I think this is now, if this is the article I'm thinking of, and really, of course it would be, because there's no chance that so many people who listen to, well, I don't know, we're pretty smart and observant people. I was going to say the chances, maybe I'll say, are lower than you might expect.
that 3-4 different listeners to the show would all be pointing to different stories via the Miami Herald. But I don't think it's actually true. Let's see. Kate Sherrill just sent it. Twister Cat sent it 37 minutes ago. And if I scroll back a little bit more, I know I saw Armando tweet it yesterday, and I'm probably missing some more people who tweeted it perhaps over the last day or two, but didn't put the KITM hashtag on it, which I encourage you all to do. It helps these stories hang on a little bit longer on my screen, and I can scroll back and credit you a little bit easier too. There's less traffic in there than in my notifications column. Thank you, TweetDeck. But everybody's pointing to pretty much the same thing here. So let's click on the latest example of such tweets to me, and I'll put it in Pocket so that I can save it for the rest of you to see in the roundup. What are we talking about? Why is the Miami Herald on my screen? The answer is the headline of, let's see, this would be June 22nd. Was that Friday or was that Thursday? 22nd, 23rd? Yeah, that was like Thursday. How did we not see this for so long? Answer, Miami Herald. Maybe the Miami Herald needs a promotion. We tend to check the bigger name papers. We should be checking in on Florida. Well, certainly for this story. It's a Florida story. Sort of. It's also worldwide. Russian officials linked to South Florida biker club spent millions on Trump condos. Now, I have a feeling that we're going to be reading about that cluster of 7 or so of the Trump-branded condos down in, well, obviously it's going to be in Florida, but yeah, Sunny Isles Beach. There we are. And what's interesting is I scan this headline, South Florida Biker Club. My recollection was when we read the first story, and who did that? Was that Reuters that had that original story that we read on the air anyway about these Trump-branded buildings, and they were talking about a biker club being involved, but a Russian biker club. So there's more than one biker club involved in buying millions of dollars worth of Trump condos through Russian conduits. Okay. Well, let's find out. It's datelined Moscow, and let's see. Our writers here. Oh my, we got some Russian help on this one. Lily Dobrov. Oh boy, Dobrov. There we are. Dobrovolskaya. How about that? Dobrovolskaya. Man, the Russian names, we got to get used to it. And Nicholas Nehamas. My goodness. You know what's really difficult is they're all capitalized, the names, and that really doesn't help, I think, when you're trying to read aloud and get the pronunciation out of these names. They're very long, and they're all caps, and they're bolded, and they're really squashed together. It's difficult to make out the individual letters. I apologize for that, but what can you do? Moscow is our dateline. Out-of-town money pouring into South Florida real estate is as old as Henry Flagler. That's old. And out of town, we hate that. But the tale of Igor Zorin offers a 21st century twist with all the weirdness modern Miami has to offer. Russian cash, that's weird. A motorcycle club named after Russia's most powerful special forces, and a condo tower branded by Donald Trump. A natural magnet for financial crime, obviously. By the way, gun stores attract crime the way Donald Trump branded condo towers attract crime. Different kind of crime, different kind of perpetrators, but a magnet nonetheless. Remember that. Zorin is a Russian government official who has spent nearly $8 million on waterfront South Florida homes, for which there's no actual, it's a condo. Like, I don't know, should you count that as waterfront? The condo building is waterfront, but you're 10, 15, 20 stories up. Okay, you can see water from them. Zorin is a Russian government official who has spent nearly $8 million on waterfront South Florida homes, hardly financially prudent given his bureaucrat's salary of $75,000 per year. That is remarkable. He runs a state-owned broadcasting company that, among other duties, operates sound systems for the annual military parade that sends columns of soldiers and tanks rumbling through Moscow's Red Square. That doesn't sound like that lucrative a gig, does it? Zorin has other Miami connections, too. His local business associate, oh my goodness, once again with the names, Svyatoslav Mangushev, a Russian intelligence officer turned Miami real estate investor. That's obvious progression. Russian intelligence turned Miami real estate investor, helped found a biker club called Spetsnaz. Spetsnaz MC. Wow. Spetsnaz, that's MC's just the motorcycle club, I guess, is a group of motorcycle-loving South Florida expatriates who named themselves after the Russian equivalent of Delta Force or SEAL Team 6. Is that the same one? I'll have to see if we can get some discussion rolling on it. If I get a chance to scroll back and see whether that's the motorcycle gang we heard about in the first go-around, that would make some sense. If it's a Florida-based club, but it's full of Russian expatriates, then I guess I could see it working out, and that would smooth away the contradictions there. So let's see, what's this motorcycle club up to besides riding motorcycles? Spetsnaz members, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, because you don't want to offend the motorcycle guys, once asked for official recognition from Russia's biggest biker gang, the Night Wolves. That's the ones. That's the one with the guy who was like posing as, Khal Drogo or whatever, with the other Russian oligarch who had bought so many millions worth of condos. I wonder if it's the same guy. So they asked for recognition from the Night Wolves, which isn't that's sort of inherently contradictory. We're outlaws. We don't care what society says, and laws are for suckers. Can we have official recognition from the Night Wolves? Everybody's got their heroes. They are an infamous group that has strong ties to Russia's security services because they're outlaw bikers. What? The Night Wolves played a role in the Ukrainian uprising. We did learn that. Once had their flag flown in outer space by Russian cosmonauts and are under U.S. sanctions. If I stop to parse that, we'll never get anywhere. I'll do it as quickly as I can. The motorcycle gang, the Night Wolves, has a flag. 2, they played a role in the Ukrainian uprising. Yes, we heard about that one. They had their flag, which exists again, flown in outer space by Russian cosmonauts, where you can't fly flags. But okay. They were dangled weightlessly in front of cameras, I assume, and under U.S. sanctions. Again, a motorcycle gang, but there's too much to unpack. Zorin and Mangushev, you can't have the Mangushev. Zorin and Mangushev have ties in both Russia and the United States. In Russia, security firms that have been linked to Mangushev have won $2.4 million worth of contracts from Zorin's agency since 2015. And again, Zorin is the guy who runs the broadcast outfit, a state-owned broadcasting company that plays the music at the parades. $2.5 million worth of contracts from them to Mangushev, the Russian intelligence officer turned real estate investor, who's part of the Spetsnaz, Florida-based Russian expatriate motorcycle gang. Got it? So in Russia, security firms that have been linked to Mangushev have won $2.5 million worth of contracts from Zorin. In Miami, Mangushev once transferred a Florida company that owned a $1.5 million condo out of his name and into Zorin's. No deed of sale was recorded, meaning the price paid, if any, is unknown. The condo is one of 3 units Zorin owned at Trump Palace, a ritzy tower in Sunny Isles Beach, built by a local developer and branded by the Trump Organization. Total value, $5.5 million, 5.4 really, but what's 100,000 between friends? $5.4 million. Zorin still owns 2 condos there, plus a $3.3 million home in Bal Harbor. But back in Russia, none of those properties appear in the public disclosure form Zorin is required to fill out as a government official. But of course, he'll be prosecuted any minute for that by Yeah, I don't think so. It's illegal under Russian law, of course, and would trouble Zorin's bosses, according to Ilya Shumanov, a deputy director of the Russian chapter of Transparency International, which is not a motorcycle gang, but rather a global anti-graft watchdog. Given the contentious state of U.S.-Russia relations, owning properties in the United States is considered a black mark against officials like Zorin, according to Shumanov. It's like he owned a place in hell, he said, and it is a little bit like that. It's South Florida. Zorin was not an original buyer at Trump Palace, meaning his funds would not have gone to the Trump organization, which signed lucrative deals to brand several condo towers in South Florida in the early 2000s. The Trump name is attractive to Russian buyers, though. We should point that out, and they do. And there's a little link here to another Miami Herald story. I'm kind of curious what that one might be. Let's open that one up in another tab and take a look. Before Trump attacked foreigners, he helped sell them condos. That's back from October of 2016. I don't think we're going to learn much from that. I mean, we would learn plenty from that article, but it's not necessary for our continuance with this one. The Trump name is an attractive one to Russian buyers and helped turn Sunny Isles Beach into a high-rise condo haven, sometimes called, we heard this one, Little Moscow. And here's a picture, by the way, of Igor Zorin, and he's in a military-style uniform and everything. Well, all the military background you need for state broadcasting. Mangushev is a former officer in Russia's security service, the FSB, the successor agency to the KGB. He first appeared in Miami around 2010. In Russia, it sounds like the old Yakov Smirnov. In Russia, he ran a group of companies called Alpha Anti-Criminal. Wow, that's very strong statement. As alpha males who are anti-criminals. Alpha Anti-Criminal that provided security for some of Russia's biggest state-owned companies and government agencies. The Alpha Anti-Criminal companies were listed under the name of a relative until 2014, according to Russian corporate records. Okay, let's see. I've got Armando is texting about something here. Okay, about the Russian Delta Force, the name of the biker gang in Florida. And he was pointing out here, though, I would think that Trump does get a percentage of sales as a part of the royalty under the license agreement to use the Trump brand. And he may have, but as they pointed out, I think the point of their having given us this fact was that Zorin didn't buy from the developers. He bought on the resale market, so it's not clear that Trump gets any piece of that. I think it will be extraordinarily difficult for them to have negotiated that into the contracts, but it's not un-Trump-like to try to demand that future sales give a percentage to him as well. But I doubt very much that he was able to get a hold of that. Anyway, I think their point was just that he bought it from an original buyer. The original buyer's money would have gone, at least in part, to Trump. The second, the aftermarket sales, probably not. But that's the reason they brought up, why would he buy there at all? And the answer doesn't have to be that it was going to put money in Trump's pocket. It's just they are attracted to the Trump brand name because it's ridiculous, over-the-top American consumerism, and they think that's hilarious. I don't know. For some reason, that was very symbolic of America. And going back for a long time, Russians, back even in the Soviet days, just they very much wanted to get a hold of things that were obviously American for whatever reason, sometimes just the camp value, even if they were dedicated communists. For whatever reason, they couldn't wait to get their hands on, in Soviet days, Levi's jeans and American cigarettes. And by the way, not Marlboros. I always thought that was interesting. In my limited travels there, I had thought that for sure, I'd heard that they were interested in American cigarettes, and I would think, when I thought about, well, what's the most American of American cigarettes in terms of market share here in America, and between that and the advertising with the Marlboro cowboy dude and everything, I figured they'd want those Marlboros in the nice red packs, and it's possible they might prefer some other brand, but I was not prepared to learn that they valued Kent brand cigarettes above all else, when at least in 1989 anyway. So when I bought cartons of cigarettes to bring with me to trade for things because I'm a filthy capitalist, pig and whatnot. I bought Marlboro and they were like, "What's this? Don't you have any Kent?" Have you been to America? Obviously not. Not at that time. They wouldn't have been able to be there. And but how it would seep into their culture that Kent was the one to have, no idea. They're not in movies. They're not in television. But maybe it was just hard for them to pronounce Marlboro. All those letters are jammed together. Here's just 4. That I can pronounce. Okay, no, seriously, there was a story about the condos in Florida. We were going to read about this. In Russia, we found out about Mangushev and his Alpha Anti-Criminal outfit. The Alpha Anti-Criminal companies were listed under the name of a relative until 2014, but he obviously ran them. The Alpha team is an elite Spetsnaz counterterrorism unit. You get that? We have Delta Force. They said, oh yeah, well we have Alpha team. Counterterrorism unit that operates within Russia's security service. Mangushev told Russian media that he is a former Alpha Team officer and that many of his employees are veterans of Russia's security service. Although, to be honest, I bet you a small amount of money that Donald Trump says he's a former Alpha Team member as well. It might be just something people brag about there. Zorin would not comment for this story. A Miami attorney for Mangushev, you'll never believe it, the Miami attorney is apparently Russian, Olesia Belchenko, although does that mean they're Belarusian or Ukrainian? I don't know. I don't know the ins and outs of the surnames. Anyway, Olesia Belchenko, Mangushev's lawyer, declined to answer a list of written questions except to say that her client sold his Russian security firms in 2013, even before they were in his name, and has no business relationship with Zorin. So it's all on the up and up. Publicly available records, though, suggest that Zorin and Mangushev are connected. In 2011, Zorin wrote a letter of recommendation for Alpha Anti-Criminal, posted on the group's website, while Mangushev's attorney said he no longer owns Alpha Anti-Criminal and its related entities. Russian corporate records still list him as the majority owner of one Alpha Anti-Criminal company that is in the process of being dissolved. In addition, he manages a U.S. company called Alpha Anti-Criminal. That does seem to give it away. He's not a very good criminal, but then again, he's an anti-criminal. And the website for his South Florida realty firm, I'll give you one guess. What's the name of his South Florida realty firm? It doesn't, if I give you a hint, it doesn't have the word anti-criminal in it, but, okay, perhaps you've guessed, perhaps you've read this, perhaps you're one of the 500 people who texted it to me, and the website says that his South Florida realty firm is called Alpha Realty, and it lists Alpha Anti-Criminal as a partner, which is really remarkable on a number of levels, not the least of which is if you were an American person looking to buy real estate. I don't know. I mean, would you be impressed with, or would you raise an eyebrow like, well, what's that doing here? I mean, I can appreciate being anti-criminal, but I didn't expect to see that on a real estate website. I'm glad you're anti-criminal, certainly. But you should not raise the specter of criminality at all in the real estate venue if you don't have to. I mean, why put that idea in anyone's mind? This deal is too good to be true. I'm a little bit concerned about that. That makes me think there's something wrong with this deal. Well, don't worry. It says anti-criminal right here. I wasn't even thinking about that. Okay. Mangushev and his affiliated companies own nearly $10 million in South Florida real estate, including a Brickell condo, a Hollywood office building, an Aventura boat slip, that's an odd thing to throw in there, and a vacant residential lot near Liberty City, where liberty is so prevalent you don't even have to build on your lots. You can just let it sit there vacant. It's up to you, liberty. This is all according to local property records. Court records show that he once tried to evict his wife from a unit at the Trump Palace that charged $9,000 per month in rent. The eviction case began 1 year after he was arrested on a charge of misdemeanor battery, and she filed a domestic violence injunction against him, which was later dropped because he's anti-criminal, I guess. So the next section of the piece here, Putin's biker, begins this way. Military veterans are a growing part of America's biker culture. That's kind of always been true. But few clubs can brag of an association with Russia's special forces, if there is such a association. Well, they're bragging of it anyway. I guess we could just say few clubs in America would brag of an association with Russia's special forces. They don't care about them. They're full of people who have an association with American special forces, or at least armed forces. Spetsnaz MC was founded 2 years ago by Mangushev and other Russian expatriates, including a decorated Broward sheriff's deputy. So I guess there's some interest in that sort of branding among Americans as well, unless maybe he's Russian-born. Spetsnaz is a broad term in the Russian military that encompasses counterterrorism strike teams, elite assault forces, and special units of the FSB. Veterans of Russia's security services often rise to high positions in business and government, including President Vladimir Putin, the highest, a former director of the FSB. Zorin is not listed as a Spetsnaz bike club member. It's amazing they even have lists. However, his disclosure form states that he owns 2 motorcycles, so he's a club unto himself. One made by BMW and the other by Honda. It's not known whether he served in the special forces. That seems like an unusual detail. But of course, here in the United States, mostly, I don't think you can get into a biker gang with a BMW and a Honda. Maybe that's why they throw that out there. There is some level of doubt involved here. If you're not driving a Harley, they probably wouldn't talk to you in America. But who knows what the Russian clubs do. The political views of Spetsnaz club members veer toward nationalism, if you can believe it. In a 2010 interview with a Russian media outlet, Mangushev criticized immigration and its potential to wreak the rapid destruction of national and cultural identity. We see what's going on here, obviously, but here's the part that makes things difficult. Like, okay, where did he give this interview? Was it in America? I mean, it's a Russian media outlet, and maybe he hadn't arrived here yet, but I mean, if he's a Russian expatriate living in the United States, that seems incongruous. Yeah, immigration is terrible. Aren't you an immigrant? Yes and no. What do you mean yes and no? Yes, I am, but no, you shouldn't ask me about that or I'll punch or kill you, depending. I mean, but of course, this still works on another level. And somewhere, maybe the segue to make is to another story that I have packed away in pocket somewhere about this there's a very weird relationship between our own American alt-right, some of the most vocal opponents, we could say in the nicest terms possible, of immigration here in the United States, and Russians. They hold some strange beliefs about one another and about immigration and what sorts of immigration are respectable immigration. And Russians, for some reason, hold themselves out to be, and are held out to be by a lot of the American alt-right as the acceptable sort of Northern European / Nordic stock that you want immigrating to the United States, which is, I mean, it's ahistorical in the sense that the alt-right simply claims, well, this is the founding stock of American culture, which of course it really isn't, but I guess it doesn't matter to them because facts are stupid and they'll punch you for saying something factual if it doesn't go along with I don't know, but they cling to like the really super ancient connections between the original I guess like Northern Russian Viking related stock from, I mean, really talking about like 1,000 to 1,500 years ago. If the, you know, at this point it's like barely established archaeologically speaking, but I mean, I don't know whether any genetic markers have actually been traced, but it doesn't really matter. I mean, most of the people I think in the American alt-right are probably lying about their heritage anyway, but it wasn't traditionally the case, let's say, that traditional nationalist anti-immigration types in the United States would have counted Russian stock as acceptable. There were, you know, English, Scots, Irish, perhaps, and outside of that, perhaps there was some other acceptable sources of Western European immigration, but you know, far Eastern European Russian immigration was not, it wasn't on the list. Let's say that. But somehow now, I guess because of the affinity between the American alt-right and the oligarchic criminal culture that now pervades Russia, that they needed to fill in a backstory about why the two of them were connected, and that's the one they came up with. Anyway, back to the Motorcycle Club. In a 2010 interview with the Russian media outlet, Mangushev actually went ahead and criticized immigration and its potential to wreak the rapid destruction of national and cultural identity. I think modern Russians probably think that about different ethnicities moving to the Moscow area, because that's where much of the opportunity still lies to steal your way to fortune from the outer provinces. And they were never really happy about even having those outer provinces in Russia, but they were happy to take their natural resources and money, but they wanted the people to stay where they were. And so now, like many European capitals, they find themselves home to a much bigger ethnic mix, and some people are angry about it, and I don't know why. In 2014, the future president of the Spetsnaz Club wrote to Russia's most notorious biker group, the Night Wolves, as they say, asking to become an official affiliate. Okay. The letter was penned by German Bickbau, a Broward, what kind of name is that? A Broward sheriff's deputy who has received several commendations for his law enforcement work, according to his personnel file. German Bickbau. There's a spirit in the Night Wolves, Bickbau wrote in Russian in 2014, according to the Night Wolves website. There's something that's not in the other groups. There's the spirit of Russia. That is why we are awaiting your decision. As some stilted Russian. Anyway, during the invasion of Crimea and uprising in Ukraine, the Night Wolves took their hogs, and here we would normally be talking about Harley Davidsons. That's I don't know if you're allowed to call other motorcycles hogs, but I guess so. You can do whatever you want because America. They took their hogs on the road. Oh, it's not America, it's Russia. To join Russian-backed separatist fighters. Their leader, Alexander Zaldostanov, a plastic surgery specialist nicknamed the Surgeon. Again, not really getting the hang of the nickname thing, I guess. I mean, he is a surgeon, but okay. He has been, this surgeon, decorated by Putin, which is amazing because the plastic surgeons are usually the ones doing the decorating. He is considered a close ally of the Kremlin. In 2015, Russian cosmonauts flew the Night Wolves flag above the International Space Station. The United States has a less charitable view. In 2014, the Treasury Department put Zaldostanov and the Night Wolves under sanction, a motorcycle gang under sanction, for their role in the Ukrainian conflict. U.S. officials said the Night Wolves had abducted a Ukrainian border guard, stormed a Ukrainian naval base, and smuggled a senior Ukrainian official out of the country. In addition, the Night Wolves have been closely connected to the Russian special services and have helped to recruit separatist fighters, a Treasury news release said. On Tuesday, The Trump administration unveiled a new Ukraine-related sanctions against, I said A, but it's not. Unveiled new Ukraine-related sanctions against 38 individuals and groups, including 2 Nightwolves administrators. I can't even believe there are such things as Nightwolves administrators. And 2 organizations affiliated with the gang. It's not known whether the group ever agreed to recognize Spetsnaz. I'm dying to find out whether they did or not. In South Florida, Spetsnaz members have performed charity work and ridden up and down the East Coast, according to the group's website. We raise an eyebrow at this, but then again, that's no different from the American mafia either. I mean, they were famously big in charity to win over the hearts and minds of the communities in which they operated. It wasn't always on the up and up, but often enough the case, I guess. They met in New York, the Spetsnaz folks did, they met with New York City Russian-American law enforcement officers and have opened a Moscow chapter, which is interesting. Corporate paperwork filed in Florida says, says Spetsnaz members are family-oriented motorcycle enthusiasts from the former Soviet Union who served in the armed forces and like-minded individuals who wish to promote motorcycle safety in Russia and the United States. I mean, I guess you got to say something. Once you get to the point where you're filing corporate paperwork for your motorcycle gang, you got to say something. And you're clearly not going to say, we're a marauding band of desperados who ride our motorcycles around robbing people and selling drugs. You're going to say, we're a family-oriented motorcycle enthusiast club, and we wish to promote motorcycle safety in the United States and Russia. And Russia. Why not? Mangushev repeatedly hung up the phone when contacted by reporters at a Miami number. He is involved in civil litigation with his business partners, Gennady Aleksenko and Inessa, damn it, it's too early for this stuff, Inessa Pozdnyakova. Oh, I'm destroying these names. They're all going to ride up on their BMW motorcycles and beat me up. I shouldn't laugh. Anyway, civil litigation over his local real estate company, Bikbao, the Broward sheriff's deputy who resigned as president of the gang, I guess, last year, did not return calls. It's interesting. Motorcycle gangs like this do sort of pose a weird hybrid of legal and illegal. Like, if they're an outlaw gang, can you be a sheriff's deputy and be in it? But I guess it just illustrates the weird ways in which we allow lines to be blurred in this country, and I imagine it's even worse in Russia, where there's a sort of an official position of looking the other way and winking at one another over dual loyalties to a government and a criminal organization, where one, you're for law and order by day, and then by night you are committing the crimes at which you, I guess, return to work and wink at during the day. I mean, it's a very neat vertical integration. If you're in charge of who gets arrested and prosecuted in the country, it's kind of a weird thing. And we teach our kids in school, well, that would be the kind of person who wouldn't be involved in crime. Where I guess the reality is, well, that's somebody who can afford to be involved in crime, which is often more lucrative than legal employment, certainly more lucrative than government service employment. But they can be involved in crime. The hypocrisy of it might bother them, but the point is that they don't prosecute themselves for the crimes that they commit, and that makes it that much more lucrative. And then it's so lucrative that you can use the money to maintain yourself in office, because we all know that money talks when it comes to who gets elected. So it all wraps itself up rather neatly in a single package. They just don't tell you about that in grade school. It's not a civics course sort of discovery. Okay, so continuing on with this piece, corruption is a major problem in Russia, they helpfully inform us, sparking massive opposition-led protests in March, and South Florida figures big as a hiding place for mysterious funds. I'm sure South Florida figures big, as does New York, both because they have pretty sizable Russian populations to begin with, but also, just strangely enough, I mean, there's no contiguity as between the land areas there, New York City and South Florida. But what is common to both besides a big Russian population, or may go hand in hand with a sizable Russian population? Trump presence. How odd that, like a magnet, he seems to find money laundering and Russians wherever he goes, or they find him. I don't know. I was just walking down the street and some Russians came to me and said, launder some money for me, and I said, okay. It's not my fault. If a person needs to hide dirty money, my bet is that this person is going to South Florida, said Shumanov of Transparency International. It's an ideal place for laundering money through luxury real estate. The prices are rising, the investment is protected, and there are dozens of ways to hide the beneficial owner of an expensive condominium house or villa. It's a good guess, South Florida. New York is also a good guess, but South Florida is warmer, and it's kind of cold in Russia. So I would bet that that's a good place to start. And it's much more vacation-y. And if you've only stolen your first million or so and you're looking for your first condo, South Florida is a good place to start. New York is someplace you might want to keep a condo as well, but only when you get to the ranks of the ultra-wealthy, I think. All that money rushing into Miami has helped push home prices far beyond what most locals can afford. U.S. law enforcement is taking note of Miami's reputation as a lockbox for suspect money. Among the highest profile incidents that have left the local real estate industry feeling under siege, unprecedented federal monitoring of shell companies buying pricey homes in cash. Why do they feel under siege about that? I don't know. A wave of disclosures from the release of the secret offshore files known as the Panama Papers. I was wondering when they would rear their heads up, like Putin. And now a special prosecutor-led investigation that could focus on potential links between Russian operatives and President Donald Trump's business empire with its large South Florida footprint. None of Zorin's property purchases used bank financing. None. Meaning he most likely paid cash. He made roughly $75,000 in 2015 and $159,000, that's a lot more though, in 2016, according to his latest disclosure forms. The Trump unit he got from Mangushev was later sold to a woman who appears to be Mangushev's relative for $1.5 million, Florida records show. Meanwhile, Alpha Anti-Criminal has won dozens of contracts from Zorin's government firm, according to official records examined by the Herald in Russia. In his disclosures, Zorin failed to mention his South Florida business connection with Mangushev. It's a conflict of interest that should have been reported to Zorin's superior, Shumanov says. Russian government officials are supposed to report any properties they own overseas thanks to anti-corruption reforms signed by Putin. But you can see where that special relationship between criminality and law enforcement merge in that sense. Anybody who's worried about corruption, Putin can tell them, vote for me. I'm anti-corruption. I've signed anti-corruption reforms that require disclosure of overseas properties. And on the other hand, if you are an oligarch who owns overseas property and doesn't want to disclose it, and you appeal to Putin, Putin will say, vote for me. I will help you hide that from the law I signed. It's okay. Just give me $1 million. Starting in July, a new law will ban officials from owning shares of foreign businesses. Cutting into the LLC market, are you? Such as the Florida limited liability companies Zorin used to buy his Miami area homes, or a used tire business that Miami-Dade court records show he once tried to purchase. Everyone wants a used tire business. It's the American dream for Russians. Officials are already prohibited, of course, from owning foreign bank accounts. But here come the LLCs again. Zorin did not respond to questions in Russian, about his Florida assets that were hand-delivered to his Moscow office by a reporter. His agency, the state-owned Russian Broadcasting and Alert Network, or RSVO, as the acronym for, I guess, how you would say it in Russian, did not respond to an email. RSVO broadcasts state radio programs, operates emergency alert networks, provides infrastructure for telecommunications firms, and handles acoustic technology for major government events, according to its website. That is a broad portfolio. That includes the famous Victory Day parade through Red Square, celebrating the Soviet Union's role in the defeat of Nazi Germany, which they now regret, I guess, because they're all becoming ultra-right-wing nationalists. On Tuesday of this past week, as the Herald was attempting to contact Spetsnaz members in advance of publication, the motorcycle club filed paperwork with the state to shut down. Again, they didn't just shut down and go anywhere. They said, we'll file the paperwork to do that. They're a very responsible gang of thugs, I guess. Weird. There's an additional bit down here on Transparency International. That's the end of the article, but there's this sidebar here. The Russia chapter of Transparency International obtained the Russian public records referenced in this story and provided them to the Miami Herald. Transparency International is a global nonprofit that advocates for anti-corruption measures in government. In 1999, it opened a Moscow office and now has 40 employees around the country. Globally, the group has more than 100 chapters with a main office in Berlin. Russian public officials hide their property in foreign jurisdictions, and we want to raise awareness to this huge problem, said Ilya Shumanov, the group's deputy director in Moscow. We try to achieve three main goals: transparency, accountability, and integrity of civil society, business, and government. Well, that is, it's a laudable goal. And then for some reason, down at the bottom, a picture of German Bickbau, the Broward Sheriff's deputy, listed as the former president of Spetsnaz MC. Interestingly, the photo credit here, now he's in uniform. He's in his, by which I mean Broward County Sheriff's Office uniform, not Spetsnaz MC uniform. But the photo credit is a courtesy nod to Spetsnaz. They provided this, they provided the picture to the Miami Herald, and yet here it's a picture of him in his official uniform, not in his motorcycle gang uniform. He's a very, I don't know, nothing particularly odd looking about him, except in the photo, which, by the way, appears to be a selfie. He's chomping on a cigar, burnt down to the butt, basically. But I don't even know. Should you be smoking cigars? I mean, maybe in Florida they allow sheriff's deputies in South Florida to smoke cigars on duty. I don't know. That's just, it seems like a incongruous thing. But then again, so does being the president of a possibly outlaw motorcycle gang named after Russian special forces. Well, it's a complex situation down there in South Florida. It is very weird, very odd. Michael Musson commenting on the article, I love these Russian nicknames. Nothing goes over my head. My reflexes are too fast. I would catch it. Okay. What's that? That's a quote from, I see. Okay, so a quote there from Drax the Destroyer. Yeah, you got me when it comes to the comic book stuff. I'm stumped. I'm never up to date on that stuff. Let's see. What else have we here? Justice saying, Beta Baba... Is it Baba Lewis? Are you saying Louis? Baba Louis? What? Beta Baba Louis is a subsidiary of Alpha Anti-Criminal, according to Zeta Jones. Okay. Why not? It's a very strange situation, this thing. But yeah, I mean, at least, 4 of you that I noticed anyway in the last day or two, said this was just a must read in terms of, turning up, well, I guess corroborating evidence of what we've been discussing about the prevalence of Russian money laundering through Trump properties. And I guess that's the key takeaway from all this is Trump's willingness to be involved initially with very shady characters, which I assume he knew from the beginning that he could, just sort of brush off with the American press by saying, I don't know who, these guys are. I partnered with somebody who was building a nice building, and I don't know his background or who he's going to sell this stuff to. I just branded, and it's not me. I don't have anything to do with it. But for some reason, all the way over in Russia, everybody knows that if you're looking to purchase a condo illegally, which, as we read in this piece here, it would in fact be illegal in Russia thanks to legislation signed by Vladimir Putin. But if you're looking to do it illegally and to launder your money and you want to be a part of you want to do it in a community where everyone will know already to wink at this and not report you, because any one of their neighbors could likewise be a criminal oligarch who will stab you in the face for reporting a fellow criminal oligarch, then buy in a Trump property. Everybody else in the building is also likely to want, in exchange for you winking and keeping it quiet about what they're doing, they'll wink and keep it quiet about what you're doing, and we'll all be safe together. There's a million places. I mean, American real estate law is such that it would be very easy to launder your money anywhere. You could, if there were some particularly good reason for it, buy a condo in a high-rise tower in, I don't know, are there any high-rise tower condos in Topeka, Kansas? I don't know. If there were, you could buy them. But I mean, you could buy all over Los Angeles if you wanted to, but people tend not to do it. You could go to Vancouver. It's cold. You want someplace warm? Buy yourself a place in, I don't know, in New Orleans, in Houston, wherever. But they tend not to. I'm sure there are some who do, but only if there's a Trump place available. I just think the name is passed around in Russia like they don't ask. Not only do they not ask questions, they know very well where their bread is buttered. I mean, we had Donald Jr. say it all along and very early in the process that a disproportionate cross-section of their assets comes from Russia. And Eric always said we can get all the money we need for the golf courses in Russia. He denies he said that, et cetera, et cetera. But that's really the key connection there. I don't know that Donald Trump doesn't know the day-to-day happenings of anything he's supposed to be the president of the United States. He doesn't have any understanding of what happens here day-to-day. I'm sure he has no understanding of what happens day-to-day inside the world of the Russian oligarchs. It's the only part he's interested in is, do they give me money and are they happy to do it? And is it easy for me to walk around with my hat out and just have Russians stuff money into it? Yes? Okay. Well, then I love Russians. That's really the extent of his interest in Russia. I mean, there's no, what shall we say, no ethnic affinity there, as far as I know. Everybody else invented that. I should look back and see if I can find that piece in Pocket. As a matter of fact, I bet I could do it. This would give me a good excuse to one, to organize my thoughts, and two, to see if I can turn this piece up, though I'll want to listen in one ear and have one eye on the scanning. But let's fulfill our obligation to tell you about the gubernatorial primary field on the Republican side in Michigan. I know that doesn't flow immediately from the South Florida Trump Russian oligarch condo market. It's not the best segue ever, but she's gone through all this trouble to let us know what's going on in Michigan. We might as well catch up, and that gives me a few minutes to try and find this other article I was thinking of, and some direction for the show today might be good too. Anyway, help me out here, Rosalind. Let's inform ourselves about politics in Michigan one more time.
Good morning, David. Today I'd like to share with your listeners information about the Republican side of the Michigan 2018 gubernatorial race and how it's off to a weird start. From the Detroit Free Press, Lieutenant Governor Brian Calley's big announcement on Mackinac Island was widely expected to be his entry into the 2018 race for governor. Instead, Calley announced he will get heavily involved in a campaign to change Michigan's constitution and make the state's legislature part-time rather than the full-time body it is now. Calley has been teasing a run for governor for a month with a significant online ad buy of more than $500,000 paid for with funds from the Michigan MyPAC. But at the annual Mackinac Policy Conference, it was all about a part-time legislature. Michigan is one of only 9 states with a full-time year-round legislature, and it really begs the question why. We sure don't need any more laws or regulations than other states, Kelly said at a news conference just hours before the state's business and political leaders were set to gather at the Detroit Regional Chamber's annual Mackinac Policy Conference. Also considering a run for governor is Attorney General Bill Schuette, who came out in favor of a part-time legislature as well. From my standpoint, Michigan ought to be the 41st state to embrace a part-time legislature, Schuette said. Michigan Democratic Party Chairman Brandon Dillon said, "The issues we have in Michigan are not because we have a part-time or a full-time legislature. It's because the legislature doesn't reflect the priorities of people in the state. This seems to be quite a gimmick to make sure you have a platform to run for governor rather than what you've accomplished in the last 8 years." To change the state's constitution, the drive for a part-time legislature would have to gather 315,654 valid signatures. Kelly said a determination has not yet been made whether the group pushing the proposal will pay people to gather the signatures. "My proposal limits the legislature to 90 consecutive days of session and cuts the pay by more than half, setting it equal to what our teachers are paid," he said. Proposals to make Michigan a part-time legislature state have been made in nearly every legislative session, but none of the initiatives have gone anywhere. Some Republicans even scoff at the idea. "He's so part-time, he's not even in the rostrum today," Senate Majority Leader Arlen Meekoff told reporters in Lansing. "If you're running for governor, of course you'd like a legislature that's in a different position than it is now." According to the National Conference of State Legislatures, 10 states, including Michigan, have full-time legislatures. The rest are either part-time or have a hybrid system. The Michigan radio program Stateside asked Matt Grossman, an associate professor of political science at Michigan State University, where he directs the Institute for Public Policy and Social Research, what a part-time legislature could look like for Michigan. He said, "The associations that we've seen nationally are that if you want good quality, good government legislation, then you might not be in favor of a part-time legislature," Grossman said. "Less professionalized legislatures tend to produce less policy that wins awards or that's copied by other states and more policy that gets overturned by the courts." Grossman said if you are conservative, then you might favor this approach because in other states, part-time legislatures have been associated with lower state spending overall and often leads to more Republican electoral gains. However, he said when you reduce the power of the legislature, then somebody else usually benefits, and that somebody else, according to the research, are lobbyists. Studies show that lobbyists tend to make more prominent role when lawmakers are less professionalized. So that gives you a taste of the Republican primary for Michigan governor set to take place in 2018. Back to you, David.
Now, that is very interesting, Rosalind. Thank you for updating us as well. And you bring up an interesting point. I hadn't planned to get into this, but that's what always surprises me about these shows. Even though I'm doing them, I have no idea what's going to come up next, and so I remain interested anyway. Whether or not the rest of you do, I guess remains to be seen. We'll see how we do tomorrow and whether we still have an audience. I think so. That I think is fascinating. Part-time legislatures, that's true. Lots of states, most states, in fact, have got that. And you know what that really has made possible is cleared the way for the rise of ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, to really sneak in some of the worst, most regressive, ultra-conservative legislation we've seen in a long time. I mean, most of the really horrible things that we've seen passed in state after state after state have come through that, and they take advantage of the fact that part-time legislators often have little to no idea and certainly little to no motivation to come up with any ideas of their own other than how can I hang on to this pretty sweet deal where I get a reasonably hefty paycheck and a lot of power in exchange for not spending a great deal of time on this whole project. And a part of the answer to how they maintain this is ALEC is the one that's giving them legislation. It's interesting that they said that one of the features of having a full-time legislature is that you have professionalized legislators who come up with, as they said, what did they say, award-winning legislation or legislation that's copied by other states. But ALEC steps in and provides the legislation that's copied by other states with the intention of having it be copied state to state. And these part-time legislators to the extent that they're worried about having award-winning legislation, I don't really know what kind of awards there are, and that shouldn't really necessarily be your motivation, but let's say it is. ALEC will just provide it to you. You can look like every bit the full-time, thoughtful legislator without putting the time in on it if you'll just take ALEC-formed legislation and put your name on it. And they give it to you with blanks up at the top so that you can do that. The idea is that you'll literally copy it and put your name on it and submit it in your home state legislature. And that they'll be able to either put together a network of 50 or near 50 states around the country that have similar laws and thereby sort of bypass the trouble of getting the national legislature to deal with these things, or just take their profits where they can in states where they're able to change the law. But that's a big part of what ALEC is doing and they need, I think, to deprofessionalize the state legislatures. And to the extent that they're able to do that, they become more reliant on ALEC written legislation, and they can accomplish that much more in the way of their conservative goals that way. So it's an excellent point to bring up. And unfortunately, a very popular trend to back away from the professional full-time legislature. And most people, if they don't give it much thought, if you're asked, well, should we move to a part-time legislature and then therefore reduce their salaries, people just give that the thumbs up. Anything to reduce the salaries of these clowns in our state capital, you bet, whether they're clowns or not. Anyway, let's see. This did give me the opportunity to scroll down a little bit through Pocket and turn up a couple of things that might make for an interesting angle on continuing the South Florida story. And it keeps us out of the immediate currency of the news in terms of Donald Trump's anger tweeting, and also, I guess, the last day or two, Ivanka Trump's having been interviewed and I don't know, somehow rather incongruously insisting that though she is a senior advisor to the President of the United States, she tries to stay out of politics. And I also, P.S., advise him on all things political. But I'd like to have my cake and eat it too. I don't know how that worked out, but that's just Ivanka speak. She says whatever the hell. Doesn't make a difference. But we'll revisit that, no doubt, for the rest of the week. But I wanted to go down here. I had scrolled down. I told you that there was some sort of weird affinity as between the alt-right, the American alt-right, and Russians. And not just of late because the Russians delivered us Donald Trump, and Donald Trump is the alt-right hero, weirdly enough. I mean, quite honestly, they just don't have a great deal in common with the guy. But I don't know. He's a vehicle. They used him. That's all they care about. But here's what I mean. This caught my eye several weeks ago. This is, well, I guess it's not that many several. It's just a few weeks ago. From June 5th of this year. But a sort of a random tweet that I guess had been retweeted into my tweet stream because I don't believe I follow this person. But have I got, let me see if I can get this name pronounced here. Tananariv Du is, but she's following me, so I should be following her as well, I guess. But author, screenwriter, mom, resistance, let's say, so that's the hashtag, the resistance. Other hashtags included in her bio help us get some sense of who she is. Afrofuturism, how about that? That's one I haven't seen yet. Horror, Hollywood, that's not a hashtag. American Book Award and Image Award. And, an interesting figure all around, I would say, because this particular tweet and piece that she picked up on, I thought was really interesting. And she just puts it this way: in case you're confused about the current Russia fetish on the right, and I think we all are. She's not. We are. It's not just about money. It's also about maintaining white supremacy. And that, it's a bit of an aha moment there. But again, you know, we didn't traditionally think of Russian ethnics as that concerned about white supremacy. But, you know, we just traditionally didn't find out a whole great deal about what was going on the, you know, ground level in Russia. We concerned ourselves with the Soviet government and dealing with them. So what do we mean here? She's retweeting a tweet from Diana Pan, who is I guess a writer for the Post and Courier. As I'm sort of scrolling over this this tweet here, covering Dylan Roof, the murderer of the folks in the church in Charleston, South Carolina. What are we, like 2 years on in that story? In his journal, Dylan Roof wrote about his love for conservative, racially aware Russia because the government, quote, supports these beliefs. That is, the Russian government. And I just don't know if that has reached most of us, but I guess, there are mechanisms through which it would have reached the American alt-right without coming to our attention. But that is interesting, and I mean, that predates the rise that most of us witnessed, anyway, the public rise of the American alt-right. So let's take a look at this bit here. In his journal, Dylan Roof wrote about his love for conservative, racially aware Russia because the government supports these beliefs. There's a photocopy of a page out of his journal, which is bound to have some offensive content as well. I hope it's not contained in this particular page. But it begins up at the top of the page. He cuts in the middle. All Russian people know this. What is it? The far right. So the far right in Russia, it says, feels and is empowered. If in England, for example, the skinheads thought they had popular opinion support, or the support of popular opinion, the popular opinions support, they would and could act more brashly. Now, is the reason Russia is a conservative, racially aware country because it is Slavic? Of course not. Sure, why not, Dylan? Of course not, he says. It is because their government supports these beliefs and has pride in its people, as well as the fact that their media doesn't have a far-left agenda, and neither do their schools. And it goes on from there, but blah, 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 and the picture ends there. That's all we see of his journal, and that's probably enough. But it's an interesting point that somewhere along the line, I mean, you remember Dylan Roof wearing patches on his jacket in the photos that we saw of him, of the flags of pre-reform and apartheid era South Africa, as well as the Rhodesian flag, which I think would have been enormously difficult to find. Even among white supremacists, I doubt very much that very many of them remembered Rhodesia. I guess maybe it had some camp value to them or something. And look, I'm an old school white supremacist. I even remember Rhodesia. Anyway, there was something obviously very strange about his having chosen to do that. But at least, we were able to immediately understand the surface connection that he might think he had with those countries. But Russia was a more difficult one to understand. And we didn't see any Russian symbolism anywhere on it in the photos that we saw of him. But it does make for an interesting explanation as to why. There's very definitely I don't know if they would describe it as alt-right in Russia. I'm sure they have a very different political orientation for it. But there's definitely a ethnic nationalist movement there, and there always has been, I guess. I mean, I'm sure it has disturbed people for a long time, and maybe they had to put up with it quietly during the Soviet era, but there was always a tension there involved in having a government that ostensibly recognizes the equality of all of its citizens as a communist country, as opposed to the equality of all of its citizens as a Western-style democracy here in the United States. It's sort of a different approach to the same end, but the results of that were, of course, you would be bringing people in from the provinces all over, and Russia, the Soviet Union, had a vast expanse of territory that would have included hundreds of ethnicities, all of which would have appeared to be nothing more than foreign and dark and facially distinguishable, easily distinguishable from your traditional Moscow population. But all of these people coming in from the provinces would be considered weird and exotic, I'm sure, by the local ethnic Russian populace. But the official doctrine of the government was such that there just wasn't anything that anybody would be allowed to do about it, and you'd come under official sanction for discriminating, I guess. Although I'm not that familiar with the street level application of the law in the Soviet era, but I have a feeling that throwing off the communist shackles also freed up this ethnocentric sentiment, and somehow, somewhere along the line, I guess people got in their heads that I don't know, it'd be interesting to think about, because here in America, our racists think of this as bringing back the good old days when life was simpler. Okay, we were racist back then and we liked it, and we seek to bring that back. But I don't know whether that was ever. Maybe long ago, pre-revolutionary Russia, were they proud racists and ethnocentric types? Probably, but I don't know whether they associate that with how would we describe it? I don't know if they would think of the communist regime as having somehow suppressed that traditional racism or not. It's difficult for me to figure that out. But I thought that was a really interesting observation that, that makes some sense. Why would ultra-Americans, ultra-right be so enamored of Russia, given our what of late has been a traditional animosity with the communist Soviet Union anyway. And I don't know, we were, even before then, we were never particularly comfortable with Russians. They seemed very different from the way we did things, even if there was some way to argue that there were ethnic ties as between their whitish Slavic people and our whitish Anglo Scots Irish people. But and now they've invented this thing, as I said, about casting even further back in time and saying, well, pre-Norman British Isles populations were at least arguably partially Nordic, partially Viking. The Viking raiders had left their own genetic traces behind. That would be, of course, raping the local women. Thanks a lot for doing that. But also likely doing the same in what became later on, 500 years later, northern Russia. So I don't know. It's not that much to base a. It's not anything to base anything on, a philosophy or an ethnic profile of the world. I don't know if it holds up to scientific scrutiny or archaeological evidence, but that's the world that they've constructed for themselves. And what's the difference? YOLO, LOL, nothing matters. There's no rules anyway, so go ahead. They're a bunch of wackos, and there'd be no, what would you do? Bring them 23andMe evidence to them? Oh, yeah, I see your point. Okay, I accept the science of what you're saying. There would be no point in doing that. But it actually reminded me of another piece that sort of happened across. This was sort of a Friday feeling to this show this Monday, and maybe it's the sunburn talking, but also on June 5th, I found this other article in The Atlantic, which came to me via Twitter. We should just dedicate an entire vacation week to reading what's been left in pocket, and we never got to. But I put this one aside because it came, like I said, the same day, and it put me in mind of, it answered the question a little bit for me. Like, why would people invent this weird heritage or this weird idea that, maybe it's not invented, maybe there's some factual basis to it, that there were, the Vikings ranged over this area, and if you look geographically, it makes a certain amount of sense. Sail this way, you hit what becomes northern Russia. Sail that way, you hit what becomes the British Isles. It makes a certain amount of sense. It could be possible. But would it be possible, better question perhaps for our modern times, is would it be possible to convince a significant portion of the population to start with, and then later, if they gained political power, some larger portion of the American population to join with them in this weird Russia fetish, even if they never took it to heart the way the alt-right white supremacists do? Could you engender a wider feeling of sympathy towards Russia? And if you just think, well, that could never happen, we have too much animosity and too much antagonistic history with Russia, well, I don't know. This article about a slightly different angle on a slightly different problem in a slightly different time caught my eye, and I thought you might find it somewhat interesting. This is in The Atlantic. Alan Taylor's piece of June 5th of this year. American Nazis, not now, but in the 1930s. The German-American Bund. This is prior to our involvement, of course, in World War II. And then that somewhat soured the popularity, the rise in popularity of this idea of a German-American Bund that sort of put the brakes on it at some point. But before it happened, before that tremendous upheaval happened that changed everything for those behind the German-American Bund, there was some success. In the years, it says, before the outbreak of World War II, people of German ancestry, and at least they had that, right, that they could establish, living abroad were encouraged to form citizens groups to both extol German virtues, as they said, around the world and to lobby for causes helpful to Nazi Party goals. In the United States, the Amerika-Deutscher Volksbund, or German-American Bund, was formed in 1936 as an organization of patriotic Americans of German stock, operating about 20 youth and training camps and eventually growing to a membership in the tens of thousands among 70 regional divisions across the country. On February 20th, 1939, it's getting late, right? The Bund held an Americanization rally in New York's Madison Square Garden, denouncing Jewish conspiracies, President Roosevelt, and others. The rally, attended by 20,000 supporters and members, was protested by huge crowds of anti-Nazis who were held back by 1,500 New York City police officers. It wasn't like they were going to turn them loose to have a battle, but still. As World War II began in 1939, the German-American Bund fell apart. Many of its assets were seized and its leaders arrested for embezzlement and later deported to Germany. But you should take a look at the photos that go along with this piece. There's more, and we'll see what we can get to in terms of further reading in the article. But some pictures of, really amazing shots. Here's this one, nearly 1,000, captioned here, nearly 1,000 uniformed men wearing swastika armbands and carrying Nazi banners parade past a reviewing stand. It's a fancy name for people who park their cars along the side of the road and watched. A reviewing stand in New Jersey on July 18th, 1937. The New Jersey division of the German-American Bund opened its 100-acre Camp Nordland at Sussex Hills. Dr. Salvatore Caridi of Union City, spokesman for a group of Italian-American fascists attending as guests, addressed the Bund members as Nazi friends, something you couldn't get away with later on in the United States. Though, again, they did manage to get Hogan's Heroes on the air, and I find that rather amazing. But this is a nice shot. Just your average, sort of summer afternoon in New Jersey with a giant uniformed Nazi march happening in the middle of the street. Here's another photo from the German-American Bund camp. The youth salute Hindenburg in Griggstown, New Jersey. They have a nice German cross flag here, but they look, for all intents and purposes, like Boy Scouts at Boy Scout camp today, but raising a German cross motif flag over a picture of Hindenburg. And though they are in Boy Scout uniform, the little lightning-shaped S on their armbands tends to give things away. Next picture here, Members of the German-American Bund form an honor guard, or rather a guard of honor, as they say, before the speakers stand as Fritz Kuhn, leader of the Bund, addresses a crowd at Hindenburg Park, La Crescenta, near Los Angeles, California, on April 30th, 1939. The original caption stated the park was in Sunland. We regret the error, they wanted to point out. But there they are, armbands, hats, the short little ties. That's an interesting thing, too. The ties, the style of the tie, very, very short. I don't know how Donald Trump might have fared in those days. And, of course, the very important, as it was important to the Boy Scout uniforms in the earlier photo, for some reason, that leathern strap across the shoulder, running diagonally across the front and then hooked to the belt. I mean, is that just is that suspenders? I mean, is that what that purpose is supposed to be in that? It's very militaristic and indicative of the times, but I always wondered, what was the practical usage for that? Anyway, another photo here. This is the American Nazi Bund rally near Yaphank, I'm guessing. It's Yaphank. Is that Yaphank or Yafank, New York, in 1937. Anybody know there? But once again, just your average Americans standing out there in the summer, enjoying the fine weather and staring at Nazi banners alongside a stylized American flag banner and saluting both. And some people actually in uniform, others just in shorts and T-shirts and sundresses. Just kind of weird. Next picture, this Adolf Hitler Strasse, or street. Adolf Hitler Street is a street running through Camp Siegfried, a summer camp of the German-American Bund, also in, Yaphank or Yafank, New York, which is apparently on Long Island. I just never ran across it here. Another picture with a couple of older-looking Boy Scouts, be about Eagle Scout age here, also giving fascist salutes to both the American and German flag being raised over the entrance to the camp. Youths at the German-American Bund camp stand at attention and give Nazi salutes as the American flag and German-American Youth Movement flag are lowered at a ceremony at sundown in Andover, New Jersey, July 21st, 1937. A large crowd, including uniformed group here, listening to an anniversary celebration speech at the Nazi Bund camp anniversary in 1938. And lots of straight-armed fascist salutes for the people walking in uniform in parade. Hundreds of German Americans giving the Nazi salute to young men marching in Nazi uniforms. The event was a German Day celebration sponsored by the German American Bund at Camp Siegfried on Long Island. Long Island, really? I mean, it seems ridiculous. Fritz Kuhn here in the picture, being congratulated by fellow officers of the German American Bund in New York on September 4th, 1938, as he was unanimously reelected as leader of the National Bund. I mean, there's just not much more you can say. Here's a picture with Hitler actually in it. German American Bund leader Fritz Kuhn and members of his staff pay their respects to Germany's Chancellor Adolf Hitler during a visit to Berlin. And then the startling shot of people walking down 86th Street in New York City, the German American Bund parade, carrying lots of American flags to be sure, but also the Nazi flag. It was a weird time in America and elsewhere in England and around the world, really. But I guess in terms of, it can never happen here or it can't happen here, and could the alt-right really, even if empowered politically by a Trump administration, could they really spark a wider movement towards sympathy with fetishization of Russia among Americans? You'd think it would be very difficult, but it has happened before. These pictures are amazing. Here's the shot, I guess, from Madison Square Garden, jam-packed, of course. The stage you should see decorated with American flag motifed banners, but also some very clear Nazi swastika imagery with a giant portrait of George Washington in the middle. And I mean, imagine trying to get that passed now and not generating the sort of national backlash that you would have expected at the time, but apparently not. Our fathers and grandfathers before us apparently not particularly adept at nipping those things in the bud, even in the face of rising aggression from Nazi Germany in all this. This survived right up to the beginning of the war, and perhaps even a little further. You should see the photos. I recommend it to you. I'll include it in the roundup, of course. And a lot of these photos, including people being, taken down by supporters and volunteer security forces at the speeches being given by their leadership. Hecklers at the Madison Square Garden appearance here being gang tackled, both by New York City police and the internal security volunteer forces of the German-American Bund. Well, a reminder, I guess, that anything can happen, and we need to remain vigilant about that in our country, even to this day. Well, kind of a depressing note to stop on, but we'll be back, of course, Tuesday through Friday this week, and we'll be joined later on in the week again by Greg. I'm sure Armando will have plenty to say. Joan McCarter should be with us on Wednesday. We'll check in again on the immediate threat of the passage of the horrible, Medicaid ending tax bill offered up by the Republicans, and we'll let you know as things progress whether we get any clearer picture of whether this thing's going to make it past its Senate vote. We're also informed that the House may be willing to stick around past the end of the week and into its scheduled July 4th recess to act quickly on any Senate bill that they manage to get through on this subject. Nobody's sure whether anything passes at all, but if it does, I find it not surprising in the least, I guess, that the House would say, let's stay here and capitalize on this momentum and just get this thing through. But then that does present a second hurdle. If they only squeak by in the Senate, they only barely squeaked by in the House, and they've had an awful lot of time to ruminate on this disaster, and only to see the bill become worse and worse and meaner while it's in the hands of the Senate. Would they be able to do the same? Changes have been made. The Senate's passage of it isn't exactly the end of it either. Will they trip on the first hurdle we present them this week or the second? Stay tuned. We'll find out. And in the meantime, the guys on the after show are about to take over the microphones and catch you up on everything that we set aside to have this weirder, more introspective, esoteric show today. What do they got for you on Metaphor Monday? Wasting no time, newly installed Justice Neil Gorsuch is pushing the Supreme Court to decide that religion is a license to discriminate. Breaking with tradition, first begun by the administration of Thomas Jefferson, the Trump White House skipped any celebrations for the holy month of Ramadan. No surprise there. And a U.S. District Court rules that over 4 million people can sue Mike Huckabee, let's all get in on that one, over robocalls he made promoting his Christian holiday movie. They also have some more for you on the last half I'll tell you about coming up right after this brief announcement.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
So do stay tuned for the after show. On the last half of their program, they report Jared Kushner's first tenants called him a vindictive and crooked landlord, and sporting his new Nazi haircut. Yes, Eric Trump tells Maria Bartiromo that his dad has accomplished more than any president in history. Yeah, right.